कहते दुर्भाग्य की बात है कि हमारा ओलंपिक गोल्ड होता अगर लड़की वो फाइनल में जाती और जीतती तो एक बड़ा दुर्भाग्य हमारे देश के लिए कि हमारे को मेडल नहीं मिला। तो मैंने कल एक ट्वीट किया था कि हम विनेश के साथ पहले भी थे, अब भी हैं और आगे भी रहेंगे। तो जो भी उसके संघर्ष की कहानी है, उसकी स्टोरी, हम उसके साथ हैं और आगे भी रहेंगे।
The prayers of 1.6 billion Indians, and all it took for the Court of Arbitration for Sports was one line or just 7 words in which they said that the Vinesh Phogat appeal has been dismissed. Was it on the cards? If you are really looking at it objectively, you will say this is something that was expected, because going by the past precedents, going by what the Court of Arbitration actually looks at, they were going to follow the rules to the T. Sometimes we as Indians can look at this entire matter emotionally, and there is merit to be looked at it emotionally, simply because not only did she beat the top seed, she fought bravely, qualified for the final. On the day of the final, on the day that she reached the final, she was weighing within the 50 kilogram limit. So there were enough arguments to be made in Vinesh Phogat's case. But I think the Court of Arbitration, as it always does, follows the rule book. And the rule book clearly stated, we look at 100 grams as nothing. Why 100 grams? But there are examples of other wrestlers, some who have been just 50 grams overweight, they have been dismissed. The famous case of the Japanese wrestler who was dismissed while participating in the games that were happening in his own country in Tokyo. Even that could not change things. So the rules were clear. And then the argument is, where do you draw the line? How much leeway do you give a wrestler? Is 100 gram enough? Is 50 grams enough? 110, 120? What happens? What happens then if you rule in favor of Vinesh Phogat? What happens to the wrestlers previously that had been disqualified? So all of those things needed to be taken into account. So the Court of Arbitration for Sports did enough diligence, contemplated over the matter. You knew that there were 3 delays already, and eventually decided that the rules were there in place, and they followed it and dismissed Vinesh Phogat's case. What are the options that Vinesh Phogat has at the moment? Well, she can appeal. She'll have to go to a higher court. Swiss courts is where she can go to. But more often than not, again, I'm looking at previous examples, seldom does it happen that the Swiss court will overrule a decision taken by Court of Arbitration for Sports, because the Swiss courts also believe that CAS are the specialists in sport cases, and then they do not have an authority or the jurisdiction to change sort of a decision that has been taken by CAS. And then in this case, they have taken that decision based on the rule book. Now, of course, the lawyers that argued Vinesh Phogat's case, one of the top things that they argued was that, listen, on day 1 when she reached the final, she was within 50 kilograms. So at least consider that result. Okay, day 2 she was above 50 grams. Cancel that, do not allow her to compete in the final, but allow her the silver because she reached the final weighing within 50 grams. But even there, the UWW, United World Wrestling, had their tracks covered. In their rules, they have mentioned it clearly that even if you fail the weight test on day 2, your day 1 results will not be taken into consideration. So they're not saying it after the event. These rules were already in place. And remember, every athlete, including Vinesh Phogat, has to sign a declaration that they abide by all the rules, that they've read all the rules, they agree to the rules, and only then they are participating. Once they sign that declaration, only then they participate. So legally also, UWW have their tracks covered. So there's not much that Vinesh Phogat can do. Yes, emotionally, it would have taken a toll on her. She's already announced her retirement. Emotionally, all Indians would feel let down because there were enough arguments to be made in her favor. But if you look at the rule, you couldn't have expected CAS to rule anything else but what they have, because if they had, it would have had grave repercussions on not just on the sport of wrestling, but all sport that have weight categories, because then there would have been ambiguity going forward. Boxers would argue, judo players would argue, wrestlers of course would argue, everyone would say that allow us some sort of leave, and every time a weight issue came up they would go to CAS. So CAS had to set a precedent, they had to draw a line, which they have done in the Vinesh Phogat case.